I mean, currency equals debt. And when you hold a currency, you're holding a debt instrument. And so all of those will decline in value relative to other things. As we are approaching a challenging of the world order, in other words, a great power challenging another, there is an increased likelihood of some kind of war. There are 5 kinds of wars. There's a trade war, a technology war, a geopolitical influence war, a capital war, which we're in the midst of, and then there's a military war. And those things drive countries to be self-sufficient and independent. And as a result, globalization diminishes and nationalism increases. Stock market, so in the book, it takes you through the stock markets during war periods. And so the only thing that matters for stocks is the cash flows. And as you get into the conflict, that's a different story. If you begin to see as it progresses, those that are affected by the individual events have an effect. For example, tech stocks. But anyway, in answer to your question, how does it affect the markets? It affects the value of money most fundamentally. Like what we're seeing now is that the value of money, when you run very large deficits and you have to spend a lot. You have to spend a lot on social programs. You have to spend a lot on defense. You have to spend a lot on environmental programs and so on. And so when you spend a lot more money than you earn, then you have to print money to make up that difference, to make the purchases. And then that devalues money. And so it's like the examples I gave you of the 2 currency devaluations that you had before. 1971 led to the inflationary period of the 1970s. And so you have the stock market. Yes, the stock market goes up and other things, but cash is trash. And people begin to learn that the bonds that they're holding have negative returns. And it starts to change the value of money, the value of dollars and so on. So money goes into other assets. It produces more of an inflation, and you start to enter a certain type of environment. And the environment that we're in is beginning to be very much like that of the 1970s. There's 2 ways of dealing with debt. You pay it back in hard money or you pay it back in soft money. You pay it back in hard money and you have a problem. You have a depression. So throughout history, whenever that was done, pay it back in hard money. Eventually, that was abandoned and you print money. That was what 71 was. That was what March 1933 was. And so I think that what you have to think about is the value of money. How much money does one have in debt instruments? And do you want to own that as an asset? I think they're bad assets. And so, and then how do you diversify? And the system also has to deal with what is money? Is the dollar going to remain the same sort of reserve currency? And then you see the development of alternative monies. We're seeing a variety. I think different types of money will compete with each other in the environment we're in. Some, maybe it's crypto, maybe it's gold, maybe it's other things, maybe the digital renminbi competes with the US dollar. We're going to come into an environment because everybody thinks that think about how much money is being stored in debt instruments, those debt assets. Think about how poor those returns are. So that kind of a shift, I think, is very important. All currencies have a lot of debt. And so when you look at one relative to the other, there will be a lot of printing. I mean, currency equals debt. And when you hold a currency, you're holding a debt instrument. And so all of those will decline in value relative to other things. Now, will the dollar decline more than other currencies? It's almost certain that we're going to come into this environment. We're in this environment in which there's a shifting of those currencies. So you're going to see more of China's renminbi being used. You're seeing India have a direct link with Russia on the currency. So we're in an important change in the currency. But how that is a store of wealth is a different question. So a currency is a medium of exchange and a storehold of wealth. And its storehold of wealth is now a problem, particularly for the dollar, but it's also a problem for other countries. So that's why you have inflation. As money goes into other things and the cost of borrowing is so low relative to the inflation rate, then it encourages the borrowing of money and the sale of money. In other words, not holding financial assets like that. So that's, yes, I think you're changing the nature of what money is and what the dollar is as a storehold of wealth. We're beginning a paradigm shift. A paradigm shift is a shift from a mindset, one mindset, and positioning of that mindset to another mindset and another positioning of that. So, for example, the mindset that we were in was that you have low inflation when you're owning bonds and you're owning cash, or you are operating one way. And you don't worry about that. Companies don't worry about it. Their inventories, having larger inventories, or homeowners don't worry about inflation as much in the purchases of the houses and so on. Once that shift begins, it causes a reinforcing dynamic. It's like everybody is long bonds. We've been in a 40-year bull market in bonds. And so it's been fine to have. And when that shift starts to take place, you see behavioral shifts that reinforce that cycle in the paradigm. So for example, when there is the selling of bonds, that it makes it more inflationary in and of itself, because the amount of debt that has to be sold is not just the deficit, but also the amount of the debt that's being sold is those bonds. So now interest rates have to rise a lot, or the Federal Reserve has got to come in there and buy more. And then you get wages. People make wage settlement, that and such things. So a paradigm shift is beginning to take place, and that will be also self-reinforcing. And it's taking place in this context of the conflict, which then create the breakdown of efficient systems. Each country wants to be self-sufficient. It needs to protect itself. And in being self-sufficient in that way, then you have less efficiencies in the system. And all of that becomes self-reinforcing. So it's all happened before. It's all happened many, many times before. That's covered both in the video and the book. So yeah, I'm concerned about that.